Mundy Township, Michigan. For those of you who are not in Michigan, let me show you a map real quick. This is Michigan that most of you know right here. This is Michigan. And we're going to zoom in right here to Flint, right near Flint, near the airport. There's an area called Mundy Township, right near Bishop Airport. Land all right around in there. And there's a big project going there called a megasite. What is a megasite? Well, it's a major project. The problem is we don't know exactly what's going to go there. But millions and millions of your tax dollars are going to this. The state of Michigan just approved $250 million to go to what I've been referring to as a mystery project. And there's an expert on this issue on, you would say, I guess, the opposing side, who has been talking to me, talking to people, and I want to bring her in to understand this. And this is an issue that would impact, it could impact all of you across the country, because deals like this are most likely happening in other states across the country. Marjorie, thank you very much for joining. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dave. It's a pleasure as always.
So yes, I've had you on before where we went through the very basics of what a megasite is. And this sounds like it's just is it a large parcel of land where they're trying to develop it and pitch it to whatever company or companies they can bring into the state?
Sure. Well, it's kind of a new animal. So there's, our technical definitions, and then there's kind of the evolving definition. I believe that the state of Michigan defines a megasite for industrial manufacturing, for industrial development specifically, as 500 acres or larger. And most of these megasite projects that we're looking at across the state do fit that criteria. There's a few exceptions that we don't need to get into. But largely in Michigan, these Michigan megasites are primarily targeting EV battery manufacturing and semiconductor manufacturing, both of which are incredibly water intensive.
Yeah, and the thing is, and there's an issue many people know with Goshen and other parts of the state, but I want to focus on this one. This does not get as much attention as some others, and I think it will be, though, in the near future. Let me put up an article from my former competitors at ABC 12 there, okay. Mundy Township megasite gets a $250 million to continue development. So the money, and I always changed headlines when I was working in the news, that's money that just doesn't come out of thin air. That's taxpayer money. I think we forget about that sometimes.
Absolutely. That's a straight taxpayer subsidy. 100% of that is coming out of the pockets of Michigan taxpayers. And just to clarify, this was approved by the Michigan Strategic Fund Board, which is an extension of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation.
Now, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation is a state agency, correct?
It is. So it is a nonprofit, believe it or not. Technically, it is a nonprofit public-private partnership. So that means that they receive funding mechanisms both from the state and also from private investors, which are largely comprised of the largest corporations.
Yeah, this money though, that $250 million, that is accurate. That it is taxpayer money.
It's all taxpayer dollars. Yeah.
Okay. Taxpayer money. And if I ask where that money is going, I guess the articles and the news articles are saying it's going to this megasite development, which in this map right here, I'm not sure if this is an updated map or not, but the yellow part near Bishop International Airport, it's a very large area there. Do you know where this money will be spent or how it will be spent?
Oh, I certainly don't. I don't know that there necessarily is anybody who knows. Oh, if there is, it would be at the Flint and Genesee group, which of course is the umbrella organization that controls the Flint and Genesee Economic Alliance, which is the local public-private economic development corporation under the guidance of the MEDC that will be developing this project. Now, this is where it gets interesting, and I believe that you refer to it as a mystery site.
Yeah, I say mystery project because usually I worked in television news for 25 years. There's a project. Okay, the money goes here, 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 here. You're going to send it on water, sewer. You knew where the money was going, but I call this a mystery because we don't.
Well, what's particularly odd about this and many of the other megasite projects, some similarities with Marshall and Ford, differences. What's really odd is that there is no prospective buyer. There's no specific buyer, and that's should be particularly alarming and should have been alarming to the MSF board before they approved this, because developers, the MEDC has been trying to sell this to international corporations for over a year, and they've had some pretty big bites, some pretty big fish, I should say, swim away and kind of run screaming, because at least in part, the local community has been protesting this for over a year. And there's a million other red flags. There's no environmental due diligence. The question of the water infrastructure of, where the water would come from to feed this plant there's a lot of serious issues and unanswered questions.
Yeah, and we just don't know. Now, there may be things happening. I'm sure there is. I shouldn't speculate, but behind the scenes, I'm sure there could be wheeling and dealing, and some officials, they may know of a company, right? I mean, we may not know, but they may know. They're working up something possibly.
I like you, I'm left to speculate. I do know that there were, as I say, a couple big fish on the line 6 months to about a year ago. One of them was a very, very large manufacturer, semiconductor manufacturer, which was slated to be, I believe, the largest semiconductor plant on this side of the country, possibly in the US,
Wow.
that would have consumed 90 million gallons of water per day in a multi-billion-dollar factory. That did not materialize. So those are, I know that they've had prospective buyers who have run away. Obviously, I'm just like the pro forma and the budget and exactly how the Flint and Genesee group are going to be spending this budget. I'm just left to speculate.
Yeah. So, as speculation is, I assume they want the site, as you say, when people go house shopping, they want it move-in ready. I don't know if that's a good comparison, but that's probably what I assume they're doing with it. They want it move-in ready, kind of.
That's almost precisely the terminology that the MEDC is using. Shovel-ready sites. That's what they are trying to sell to corporations. So this is the idea, and I'm sure that this was part of the behind-the-scenes pitch, is, well, yeah, of course developers are running away because these sites don't even have the right zoning yet. They don't have the infrastructure built out. We have to build out these sites to be industrial sites that are shovel ready, as in ready for the developer to just come in and build their building. So that's the goal. That's what the MEDC and their local economic development corporations are trying to do.
The problem I see is, this a risk? What if they can't land a big project or a big companies, or they all go to Tennessee or Indiana, and then what happens to all this money we've spent?
Right. Or what if they, are able to get a factory off the ground for the first couple of years, but then the market shifts, as we can already see happening in AV, and then we end up with an abandoned factory. Michigan has a lot of towns with abandoned factories. Where would the money go? Again, like the rest of us Michigan taxpayers, I am left to speculate, but I have a feeling that money won't end up going back to the taxpayers, and the profit that individuals made along the way. And that's not tinfoil hat. That's how development works. At every stage of the development process, when a large transaction takes place, individuals get a cut of it. Individuals make a large profit. So last week, a few individuals made a lot of money off of those transactions, and Michigan taxpayers are not seeing those dollars come back to them.
When these contracts are written, and you have expertise in this, $250 million, do they come with stipulations? Well, I guess this wouldn't matter, but a factory comes to town 2 years later, they drop ship and they leave, and do they have to pay that money back? Or I guess it depends on the project.
Sure. Yes to both. So clawbacks is the technical term that we're looking for here. And, I can talk to you in specific detail about the clawbacks with Goshen, for example, which is, different because that's a specific project and a specific buyer.
Yeah.
I can't speak to the specific clawbacks in this 250 million funding from the MSF, but they are the same types of grants. So yes, there are going to be clawbacks in there. To the Economic Development Corporation, to the Flint and Genesee group, that require some type of, proof of progress. Now, like I said, I'm not exactly sure what those are. That's something that the Mundy grassroots folks, who those of you who are listening, should probably dig in and find out as soon as possible.
Yeah. So just, and the big thing is the major thing, transparency. We don't know, and even those who are in supportive of this, you would think they would want to know more. It seems like they're just blindly trusting government, which is, as we know now, a scary situation to do.
Just trust the government. They're here to help. Yeah, that's it precisely. It's a very, like I said, it's a very strange situation. And what I find, personally most concerning based on my professional experience is the blatantly heavy-handed sales tactic. This is pretty, from my perspective, this is pretty blatantly just a very, very heavy-handed sales tactics. No, you don't have time to make a decision. You have to do it now. No, there's no time to wait. Climate change is happening. And listen, hey, I am not a climate change. I don't even like the term. I'm not a climate change denialist. I'm not. That's a different conversation. And I'm an environmentalist, right? So I am all for reducing and/or stopping the burning of fossil fuels. But this type of sales tactic does not precede a quality product. Right? Like you don't use this kind of heavy selling tactic if you have a product that is offering and bringing genuine value to your customers.
This, I'll put it up on the screen, the 250 million. I think a week ago this past, or May 21st. It seems like I found out about it the night before. It seems like these pop up just in the middle of the night, or not in the middle of the night, but without very short notice, these things pop up. This would seem like something you would want not just a short notice on.
Right. Time for people to investigate, time to gather some local community stakeholder input, which is, well, and since you mentioned that, it's worth noting also that not only did they, you could say pull a fast one, right? Like, it was, I don't know exactly how far in advance the agenda was published, but not very far in advance. So they gave very little time for people to react. But what they did do was change their public comment policy very shortly before the meeting, requiring people who are going to be public commenting virtually to pre-register before 3 p.m. the day before. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why you did not hear a groundswell of public comment from Mundy residents. By the way, this pre-registration link is buried at the bottom of a web page that nobody knows how to find.
That, not related, but that's exactly what Governor Whitmer did during her COVID news conferences. She had to, and then she would vet which reporter would be allowed on the call. But anyway,
seems to be a common culture that's spreading.
Yeah, that's a whole other story. So, transparency, major issue. So. Yeah. I want to put on the screen because Chad Young is the manager. He's the Mundy Township manager.
Yep. Again, not elected. He's hired by the board to be the township manager.
Not elected. And it's long, so bear with me. I want to be fair to him and read what he sent me. And you can read along. I think you can see it here. He says, quote, "I wish to make it abundantly clear that Mundy Township is neither a party." Oh, sorry, my phone's going off. I wish to make it abundantly clear that Mundy Township is neither a party nor recipient of any of the state grant monies that were approved by the Michigan Strategic Fund at their meeting. To the best of my knowledge, the funding is being made available to pursue additional land acquisition and any expanded professional services that may be necessary. Any further inquiry on the subject is to go to the Flint and Genesee Economic Alliance and Michigan Strategic Fund. So basically, he's saying there that Mundy Township is not getting the money and that they really have nothing to do with this kind of.
Yeah, well, and that's, obviously all of that is factually accurate, that money is not going to Mundy Township. There's more context, right? Like there always is. And again, I'm not a Mundy Township resident. There are locals who are much, much greater experts on this.
Exactly.
But, I was there in Mundy Township last October, when there was a groundswell, when their local Genesee Coalition for Clean Water presented to the township board, and I heard Chad Young speak, and I heard the interactions with him and the residents. And, Chad has been doing, from my perspective, and I think from the perspective of a lot of residents, has been doing his best to kind of publicly wash his hands of this and say, we have nothing to do with this whatsoever. And again, while what he's saying is technically true, there's no monies that are coming into the township. Mundy Town, some some Mundy Township board members have signed NDAs with the MEDC in regards to this project. Chad Young has clearly been involved in conversations about this. And it's worth noting to kind of advocate for the lobbying campaign that the local residents did last October and are still pushing and continuing, which is that they asked the Mundy Township Board to vote to approve a moratorium on the Mundy megasite for a minimum of a year to insist that proper due diligence be performed. And the board has yet to take that moratorium up, or to really honestly even have any serious conversation about residents' concerns.
Okay. And one more from him, because I want to give him credit. I've interviewed him before. He came on my show. I give him credit for that. And his point is, in this comment right here, Mundy Township still has not received any application or request seeking approval for a specific project. We remain unaware of any company that has committed to pursuing development. Though we have been open to the beginning, there is significant effort being made to market the area and recruit a user. Clearly, the resources that have been made available to those putting the project are substantial. Mundy Township takes the situation and the prospect that a large development may seek permission to locate here seriously. I remain steadfast in my assertion that Mundy Township has taken steps to install a regulatory framework that empowers our elected board of trustees and local planning commission to make a decision that represents the best interests of the community should that time come. And so I know I talk fast, but
No, you're great.
But when I interviewed him before, his point was, yes, I think there may be wheeling or things going on behind the scenes, which he said there's not, take him at his word. But he said that at some point, if there is, it'll be put on the agenda. There'll be discussions. You would hope that would be the case. I mean, legal, I think, right? You can't change things, and it would have to go in front of the board. His point is, I guess.
There are legal. So certain types of zoning do legally require public hearings, for example. There are some exceptions. That's boring and nerdy, and we don't want to get into it. It's most likely that for a zoning change, right, for that land, that there, Mundy Township's Planning Commission, for example, will be required to make a zoning change, and that will most likely, or multiple zoning changes will likely require public hearing. And I, to be fair, to throw them a bone, and also to demonstrate that I do understand local township. Well, I mean, to a certain extent, I understand the basics of local township law, which is what Mundy Township board members have been saying is, listen, we can't do anything to stop something that's not on our desk. We don't have anything on our desk right now to vote for or against, right? We're not, we're just waiting for the MEDC and MSF to tell us who's coming to this project, just like you are. And to a certain extent, that's true. Again, It's also kind of not true, because they also haven't yet adopted the moratorium that their residents asked them to adopt. They could also, and I know that local officials don't like doing things like this, but they could also make a big difference by taking a stand about the project publicly in the media. Obviously, that hasn't happened.
Either for or against, you mean, or just give?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or simply to say, much like, not to expose them, much like I asked our local Big Rapids mayor here, I just want you to write a letter saying that you have some concerns about these environmental and health issues. Right? Not for or against. I just want you to say, hey, these are some valid concerns. We should all take a look at that.
The big thing that there were, I believe, non-disclosure agreements signed by various officials, and that's happened throughout the state of Michigan. That's not unusual, but a non-disclosure agreement, for those who don't know, and it's in any type of business or law or whatever, basically so you can discuss things behind closed doors. You don't want to jeopardize any, possible business or trade secrets, something like that. But what's your whole thing with NDAs when it comes, not just Mundy Township, but across the state on projects like this? Is it abused? Because it's...
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, this is clearly the new normal. When people talk about how normal it is to have NDAs in business agreements like this, it's like, well, it clearly is now. I was working in I was creative director at a startup urban real estate development company about 10 years ago. And this level of NDAs, certainly, the idea of local officials taking NDAs
that's what I want to ask. It's me when I was a journalist I worked for a company. I could enter an NDA like a private company, the company. That's fine, but I really haven't. Maybe it's because I'm not paying attention over my 25 years, but I don't remember a lot of NDAs with corporate and government and private. Does that happen a lot, or is that a newer thing?
I believe that that's fairly new, and
Okay.
particular. The big difference is taxpayer dollars. If you are elected by local officials and or if taxpayers are paying a portion of your salary, it really changes the game, right? So there's a big difference between a regular for-profit developer who is, let's say, working with the local city to get some TIF funding to help for brownfield redevelopment, and the developer signs an NDA to protect his brokers. That is standard. A public-private nonprofit economic development corporation that is partially funded by taxpayers, insisting that not only their development staff, but also the local officials that they are working with all sign NDAs.
Yeah.
That is, it's historically, no, that's not normal. No.
Okay. And once again, I interviewed Chad before. He was gracious enough to email me back. Most officials won't give me the time of day, which is good at least. And he said he takes questions and answers from people. When it comes to, like, I've covered city councils before, and so let's say I own a huge company and I want to put my company here. Do I go, it's the state that handling that. I think Chad was right. It's not Mundy Township. So the state, I would deal with the MEDC or the state on this, or what's the name of the group? Sorry.
The Flint and Genesee group, or properly the Economic Alliance.
Okay, so I deal with them, and then do they drop it on Mundy Township and say, okay, we got a deal without any talks, or like, and then it's done?
If we are to consider Marshall and Big Rapids any kind of model, yeah.
So is that is that what happened out there? Really, did they work the deal behind the scenes and all of a sudden they dropped it on the local municipalities?
Oh yeah, the MEDC and our legislators informed us that we were being blessed with this project by basically passing it. In our case, both for Marshall and for Big Rapids, our legislators had to vote on and pass that funding package, and they did it as quietly and as quickly as possible. And our local township officials went down and lied to them about local community support along the way. Now, that's not. I don't anticipate seeing Mundy Township officials do that. And however, I think that one of the reasons I'm not an expert on the exact funding mechanisms. However, I do think that it's interesting that they got actually more money from the unelected MSF board than either Marshall or Goshen did through the legislature. Goshen got 175 direct cash. I mean, it's almost $1 billion total subsidies, but yeah. And Marshall got over 200, but they were both lower amounts than what Mundy just got, the 250. And I can't help but wonder if there was something that changed with the funding mechanism for this one, that they allowed it to go through the MSF so that it didn't have to be voted on, because again, that local stakeholder input was a critical part of those grants for both Big Rapids and Marshall, and our township officials had to testify to legislators where they did not for that MSF vote.
Okay, want to challenge you, and let's say, just want to challenge you. Watching this, there's some people may say, well, she sounds like she's against growth or against business, and some people might say, well, why are you so against growth or business? How do you respond to those people? You might meet them on social media or in person. How would you respond to someone who would say, why are you against growth and business and that? And I know that's not necessarily what it's about, but those people will ask those questions. How do you counter that?
Sure. Well, it's very similar to the argument that I get against other environmentalists who are like, but why don't you want to save the planet? And I'm like, oh my God, I do. I want to do it a way that's actually going to work. Same with business and economic growth. This is not good growth. These are not good jobs. This is not sustainable growth. This is very, very short-term thinking. And it's a tragedy, because not only does Michigan need economic growth, but we have cusping opportunities to participate in some really incredible industry innovation through what we already love and are good at and are geographically incredibly well equipped for, which is agriculture. Hemp manufacturing materials manufacturing, talk about turning waste wool into industrial agricultural products, and that's not even talking about food hubs and economic growth through feeding our own as well as other communities. Michigan has incredible potential in agriculture, and I'm talking about the ability to make money, and these food hubs can turn money. I can ramble about it for a long time.
Yeah,
the point is, we have good opportunities for good economic growth. This is bad economic growth. It's unsustainable. It's a big, expensive, toxic balloon that is going to pop, and we are going to take centuries to recover from it.
Do we know, though? We don't know what's going there, or have they said? And I think I talked to Chad, and I think he said there was talk of EV battery, so forth. Has it been publicly said? And I'll have to research. Have they said that that's what's going there, or that's what's popular?
The MEDC has said it will be an EV battery or semiconductor megasite. And again, both of these facilities require millions of gallons of water per day and do have very toxic wastewater.
I think, I just looked that up. You're right. That's exactly what they said. Yep. Okay. The site is targeted semiconductor manufacturing, electric vehicle battery assembly. There you go. Okay.
Yep. It could be a vehicle assembly as well.
Okay. But that industry is in flux right now. Ford Motor Company is pulling back on EVs and so forth. So,
not to mention that the leader of the industry, Toyota, has basically run screaming from EV and towards hydro internal combustion, which is interesting.
I'm going to throw something out there. Being still a journalist, I lean conservatively, but I will go after Democrats and Republicans. How much of this, having this money thrown out there, is it political? How much would it be great if the governor in October could have a ribbon cutting with the president and so forth? How much is political? Because that'd be a good look, to be opening a multi-billion-dollar, company or something like that. I've learned that a lot of it is political at times. Everything's political.
Right. Well, I would certainly not be the first person to observe that Governor Whitmer is pretty clearly trying to stack herself up for a presidential candidate. I don't know whether to replace Biden this cycle or to run the next cycle. She's I think it's pretty clear that she's been cozying up with the Biden administration to try to do, exactly something like that. However, I think it's grossly backfiring on her. And, being in Michigan the last several elections has been really interesting. And I got to tell you, as an independent, I have a dog in the fight, just not in either political party. Wow. It is not looking good for the Democrats in Michigan right now.
Yeah. And let me get away from that. With this project, there's been no environmental impact studies done that we know of, or no?
No, there has been no environmental impact study in Mundy. To my knowledge, I'm not aware of any environmental assessment, which is just a very, much less intensive baseline. I'm not aware of anything that has been done. No water studies on even where the water tables and the aquifers even are right now.
Is it not fair to argue that point? Because is that something that when the agreement, then they would do it? Like, I remember covering a story when a Walmart came to town as part of the proposal with city council, then they started studying and so forth. Or is the problem, is all of this done before, like, sign and sealed, before we even have a chance to do these studies? And it sounds like new territory, really.
Well, it is, because they're changing the rules of the game. Again, historically, environmental impact studies are for stakeholders to use to determine whether or not a project is a good idea. They should have been, impact studies should be done before any massive amount of funding takes place.
Exactly. I remember, and it may be on a small scale, wherever I was, I think it was when I was back working in Saginaw 15 years ago, there was some proposal, Walmart or whatever company came forward, and, the study, this is going to do that, that is going to do that, and council voted it down. That's what I'm saying. Can that happen in this instance, or is it just going to be like, here you go?
It could, if they were going to do the studies. They're not, just like they didn't in Big Rapids, just like they didn't in Marshall. Marshall has a very weak environmental assessment. Let's just put it that way. Again, no water studies. All of these industrial projects are incredibly water intensive, wildly toxic to aquifers, no water studies. So yeah, no, the idea of environmental impact studies is for them to be done early enough. This has been a point of great contention, particularly with Goshen locally here in Big Rapids, but with all of them.
Require them to do something different as
and we can niggle about exactly when it should and what the law says. It is required by law, which is another conversation. But the point is, broadly speaking, the purpose of environmental impact reporting is to provide the concrete scientific data for stakeholders to be able to make informed decisions before they're pot committed.
So we don't know, and you know, Chad Young in his one statement said that they would make or they would be able to, you know, talk about it and so forth. Where is it here? Oh, this one about regulatory framework. But do we know that will be the case? But you said it hasn't been in the other instances across the state. And, you know, Chad Young, it may be different in Mundy, but you're saying if past practices are to show what's going to happen, that didn't happen. It just, boom, there it was.
Yeah, there's been no reporting. And let me put it this way. MEDC just handed over $250 million to a local economic developer, which is already a pretty kind of large, bloated organization, in my opinion. They get an actual buyer on the line. They start building water pipelines. Sooner than that, they purchase, you know, all 1,000 acres of land.
Yeah.
They come to the township with that $250 million from the MEDC with 1,000 acres purchased. They come to the township for zoning. Do you think the township at that point is going to be in a position to say no?
Legally, they could, though, right?
Well, I don't know. Big Rapids is being sued by the developer right now for a violation of development agreement. So
that $250 million, if they start acquiring land, putting in sewers, pipes, all this, they can do that before getting approval from the municipalities?
There's a lot that they can do before they have to run up against approval from the local township. Okay. Exactly what that is, I can't say, and local residents could speak to that more expertly. But yeah, there's a lot that they can do without needing township. I mean, really, that township approval, you know, comes down to zoning. You know, Swartz Creek, the city of Swartz Creek may have some input in regards to the water system, depending on where they're planning on pulling it from.
Why, and this is the more speculation, why did like Stellantis and other companies pass on this site? I mean, I'm wondering, and they're not going to say, I don't think they talk publicly about that, but why any scuttlebutt or talk about why, you know, they would pass? Governor Whitmer wants to keep these companies here. And it looks like they were, especially when they're being given money thrown at them, you would think they would want it unless other states are giving, I don't know.
Just handing it out like brokers at a strip club. Yeah, why would they take a pass on it? To speculate, I think it's two reasons. I think the EV market just isn't viable. I think that the bubble is already bursting, or on its way to bursting, and I think that the market players are seeing that pretty clearly. Two, the Mundy Town, these megasite projects are toxic in terms of PR for any corporation. Stellantis is a you know, it's a homegrown auto manufacturer. You know, Detroit is their home. What's the old saying about not pooping where you eat? I think that they don't want to touch these megasites because they're so controversial, and the local communities and residents are so opposed to them.
One last thing, it's true, and I've done the research, and many times when politicians say, okay, we're bringing 5,000 jobs to town, most of the time it does not happen. They'll bring jobs, but not as many as they say they are. It's all about the publicity, because a lot of times the media never goes back and looks at the news release. Will say we're bringing 2,000 jobs to town when it really ended up being 800. That's always an issue too, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Also, the wages being a lot lower than they're projected. You know, they keep saying we need good paying jobs, and these there's this romanticization as if these manufacturing jobs are the same as they were, back in the 60s and the 70s, and they are not. They're promising, over $25 an hour. First of all, that's not that high. Second of all, if you're getting cancer to get it, and your insurance deductible is 10,000, it's not going to cover your medical bills. That's also very expensive. But third, if we benchmark the wages that we have to look at the Ultium Cell factory down in Ohio. There have been strikes over wages, which have been as low as $16 an hour.
Wow.
Yeah, not to mention they just had a chemical spill down there too.
Boy.
So yeah, in terms of accountability, again, talked about a lot about environmental impact assessment. I'm not seeing any third-party economic assessments on this, and this is where we would expect to get, real authoritative kind of wage and job projections. And when you ask these corporations like Ocean to provide any kind of breakdown on where they're coming up with these numbers, they got nothing.
Gotcha. So what is the message to the people in Mundy Township? Though it seems like everyone should really be just inquisitive and want to know more. And it seems like people, as always, are taking sides, no matter what the information is. But it seems like, especially the elected officials in the township's impact, that they should just want to be on a fact-finding mission and what's best for the community. But I know it's in many instances, that's not what happens. But
Right.
What should the average person do? Just be asking questions, going to meetings, emailing their officials, and Chad Young, like, give him credit. He said he'll take calls, he'll take emails, he'll take meetings with people. What should the average person be doing?
Well, it's tough. Local township and county advocacy is really, really critical. And those local touch points and those local officials and staying close to them it's of the utmost importance. It's absolutely critical. So yes, reach out to, communicate, flood your town halls, and don't just do it once. Make a regular habit. Like, try to make it a monthly thing. Go to all of your dumb town hall meetings. Believe me, I know how painful it is.
Yeah.
But try to get involved. Consider running, right? Consider becoming a trustee or a candidate yourself, or just giving it a try. But beyond that, you have to keep your eye on where this is really coming from. And
that's what I wanted to ask. Sorry to interrupt, but does it even matter about the local level? Is it all up in Lansing?
It all matters. And that's
Okay.
one of the things about this project, about these types of projects in this situation, that has been just so demoralizing and exhausting to those of us who've been in the fight, because you have to be everywhere all at once and do everything all at once in order to fight it. And so, yeah, your local officials, it's so important to stay close to them, regardless of where you're at. Even if your community isn't facing a mega site, if you want to make sure that it doesn't, you need to be going to your town hall meetings. But the MEDC is funding this. And they are effectively right now. And I believe the current, governor administration has allowed them to become so. They are acting as a runaway, unelected fourth branch of the government.
Exactly.
And the fact that they are working to actively suppress stakeholder input and public comment, just like they did last week with Mundy, tells you that our noise that we're making is bugging them and is making their job more difficult. So we all need to crank that up and really turn on the pressure on the MEDC and on the current administration.
Okay, this will be the last question. Let's say Mundy Township, Chad Young, they all say, no, we don't want it, we're voting no. Is that the end, or does it not matter? Or do we not know yet how the laws work, or can they say, if they all, agree with you and say, no, we're not doing it, is that the end of it, or no?
It's the wild, wild west right now. The MEDC could get tired and be like, okay, all right, we tried. I think that's unlikely. The township could be sued by the MEDC.
Wow.
It's a really tasteless analogy. So please forgive me to any of your audience members that I trigger or offend, but really the best analogy is the MEDC and these economic development corporations really are acting like the world's worst date. They don't know how to take no for an answer. They don't care. That's why they don't ask.
So if you're the board, any of the elected officials down there, you're kind of in a way in a no-win situation. If you voted it no, then you could have a big lawsuit coming at you. So they, in a way, have been put in a bad situation themselves as well.
Be strangled for funding. Keep in mind, these economic development corporations also hold a lot of their funding that they need for local infrastructure projects.
So for things down the road, they may not get this or that or whatever it might be.
Did you not want that park repaired? Oh, so you don't want to play ball with us. That type of thing.
Yeah. So in a way, they're in a no-win situation, in a kind of.
They're at the risk of not holding them accountable, because there's a lot of accountability.
Yeah.
There is a certain amount of empathy. Yeah. Like they are in some ways in kind of the same boat that we local residents are. They have more power than us, but they're just above us on the totem pole.
Yeah. Well, I will have another show to dig in the history of the MEDC, how that all went down, because people are waking up and I think they want to know. And when I was working in TV news, I couldn't do all of they only gave me 2 minutes. I couldn't do just 2 minutes with you. I just couldn't.
And thank you so much, Dave. Seriously, those 3-minute segments kill me.
Yeah, and I literally would have to pick like 2 20-second sound bites. That's all that could fit in.
Yep.
And the consultants always told me that's all the public could stand. But you see now with, like, I know he's people don't like him. It's Joe Rogan, but if you give people real content, I think they'll listen. I think they'll listen.
You can't insult people's intelligence. I think there's value in the long form. People can pick and choose. So I really, on that note, I really very much appreciate the work that you're doing here, Dave.
And you too. And if I hear anything else, I'll let you know. Let me know. But thank you, and go and enjoy your evening. I'm here in Saginaw County. We got some storms headed our way here.
All right. Well, stay safe. Thanks so much, Dave.